So here it lists all the ratios I covered. So we have a liquidity ratio, and we have the activity ratio or efficiency ratio. We have the debt ratio, which covers the leverage and long-term solvency. We also have a profitability ratio. The one I did not cover is called operating profit. So you use operating profit divided by sales, and operating profit is your EBIT. It's the same idea with gross profit and net profit. And then you have this market ratio, which is a PE ratio and market to book ratio. And for profitability, you also have ROA, ROE, and earning per share. So these are the ratios we can develop, and you can use the information from a financial statement for different years and then generate and calculate these ratios. And then what do you do with the ratios? You're gonna compare the ratios for different years and see if the current year made an improvement or not. And then you can compare your ratio with the industry average for different ratios, and to compare whether you are doing better or worse than the peers in the industry. You can also just take a look at the overall comparison to see whether it's okay or not. So for example, in this one, if you look at 2015, and then for the time series, you are okay for the current ratio because it did not change too much, and for the cross-sectional, it is also okay. But for the quick ratio, your quick ratio has increased in the past, so if you do a time series comparison, that's good. But if you compare with the industry average, it's just okay. And for the average collection period, which is account receivable over average sales per day, also it is 365 divided by receivable turnover. You will see that if you compare in the past, the days get extended to 59 days in 2015, the newest data, and that is longer than the data in 2013 and 2014, and also it's much longer than the industry average. So for this ratio, your company at the current level is poorer than the industry average, is poorer than the historical record. So you make this comparison not just with your past, but also with the industry average. Okay, you do the comparison for both of them, and then you combine the two comparisons to get the overall comparison, to get the overall evaluation. All right, the next subject is DuPont Analysis. So in this analysis, we're going to dissect firm's financial statements into different components. In particular, we're gonna analyze the firm's ROA, which is return on assets, and ROE. And we will convert ROA to ROE by applying this equity multiplier, also called financial leverage multiplier, to the ROA. So what you see here is ROA is return on assets. It is net income divided by total assets. So this is your net income. It has a funny name here. It's called earnings available for common stockholders, but it's just a net income, as you know. So what you do there is you multiply sales on the top and then divide it by sales down the bottom. So you convert net income over total assets into two ratios. One is the net profit margin, and another is assets turnover ratio. Okay, so that's the goal of making this analysis. So ROA is now net profit margin times total assets turnover. Okay, and then from ROA, you will need to multiply this equity multiplier or financial leverage multiplier to get ROE. So this is your ROE, which is the net income divided by common stock equity. And what you do here is you multiply this equity multiplier, total assets over equity. So your total assets will get canceled, so only this one get left. So once again, the ROA was decomposed into net profit margin and total assets turnover. So your ROE will be dissect into the three components. Okay, the three components, which is ROA made by two, that is a net profit margin, the total assets turnover, and then this equity multiplier. So the three components jointly make up your ROE. So here is a practice. We're gonna do some practice in the Excel project. So I'm not gonna cover this, it's just based on the example in your textbook. All right, so here is the ROE, all right? So basically it's ROA multiplied by the financial leverage multiplier, and this ROA comes from net profit margin and the total assets turnover, and the net profit margin comes from net income and sales, and asset turnover comes from sales and total assets. And for the equity multiplier, it is total assets divided by total liabilities, divided by total equity. And then total assets is total liabilities plus total equity, and your total liability here include both current liability and long-term debt. And for total assets, it's current assets and net fixed assets. And for net income, it comes from sales deducted by costs, operating expenses, interest, taxes, and the preferred dividends. All right, so this is how ROE is made of. So before I finish, I just want you guys to know that what happened in 2008 financial crisis. All right, so this is just a story time. So before the 2008 financial crisis, the financial companies have designed incentive plans for their CEOs. So the CEOs also get paid with a large amount of stocks and options, which means they are part of the owners. So the CEOs or the managers of the financial companies care about ROE. Okay, they care about return on equity because that's how they get paid. So how can they do to improve the ROE? They either can improve the net profit margin, total assets turnover, or financial leverage. However, years before the crisis, there's nothing they could do to increase the profitability. There's nothing they could do to increase the assets turnover or efficiency. So they cannot improve efficiency, they cannot improve profit. But what they can do is to increase financial leverage. So to make a higher assets to equity ratio basically means they will borrow more money. And the years of deregulation basically enable them to borrow more money. So when this ratio, this leverage goes higher, then the ROE could get higher. So for example, like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, at the age of bankruptcy, they have a debt of 95% of the assets. That's very mad, given a normal financial firm, what it should look like. So when the firm has a lot of debt, then what would happen? They have a lot of financial distress. So when Lehman Brothers had a bad earnings for a quarter in the middle of 2008, then that just to create a large effect on its financial distress. So what happened is the leverage basically enlarged the losses. So the company stock just get bankrupted, get collapsed over a matter of weeks. So the bottom line here is we just don't want to take leverage, don't want to borrow too much money at a crazy level. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble, like the Wall Street firms on the during the financial crisis.